In a world shaped by crisis, hope can be more than optimism. It can be a practice. Welcome to the Diaries of the Bertha Accelerator. This series brings together changemakers, advocates, storytellers and organizers who came together in Istanbul at Postane, hosted in collaboration with Bertha Spaces and Bertha Foundation. Throughout the series, we ask how hope-based communication can help us imagine stories of possibility while staying grounded in reality, and explore how new narratives can be born in the midst of crisis. In this episode, you'll hear from Angeles Solís from the Action Lab and Emma Cassidy from Public Interest Litigation Support, as they reflect on the role of indigenous languages in resistance and how words can open the door to change.
How do you want to do the introduction?
I think I actually really liked how you did yours.
Okay.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. Let's start off.
Díomh Corja. Hello everybody. Hello friends. My name is Emma and I'm here today with
Angeles, who just took a big swig of iced coffee.
We're being realistic with this podcast. Come on. So I am part of the Accelerator, joining from Belfast in Northern Ireland.
And I'm joining from Queens, New York. Yeah.
Let's go. Let's get into
it. So Emma and I spent some time talking about what we wanted to share with each other and with 3 to 5 listeners.
Hello, everybody.
Yes. And of course, in these experiences, we've been together now, I think, how many days in Istanbul?
9.
Yeah. As part of this really exciting and intensive narrative residency program with journalists and organizers and of course during the day with facilitators, and in our workshops we have our hats on and are deep in strategy. But I find that some of the best conversations happen in the later hours or before we're all walking to breakfast. And one conversation that I really appreciated that we had with another group of folks was around beers. When we all went to go get beers, our first night out by the Bosphorus.
That's where the deep conversations always start, let's be honest.
Yes. And I really appreciated, I think we were teaching each other how to say cheers, and that's where this originated.
That probably was, yeah, that's right. That's right.
In our languages, and you taught us how to say in Gaelic, which do you want to share?
Sláinte. So if anybody has heard, and it's very similar to lots of toast, literally means, to your health. So sláinte. So next time anybody's doing a cheers, you can use that.
There you go. Yeah, it's like a version of salud.
Exactly.
And you talked about how you are practicing Gaelic,
yeah.
And you said it casually over beers of just this is an act of resisting, the colonization, right? So I'm curious if you could share just a little bit more about what practicing Gaelic and this return to an original language has meant to you. We'll start there. Tell us a little bit about
Good place to start.
Yes.
So I'm working in Belfast, which is in Northern Ireland, but I'm originally from the Republic of Ireland. So Irish would have been the language that was spoken across the island of Ireland, but today is still probably thriving in smaller pockets. So say along the Atlantic coast, so on the west of the island, but also there is a more modern revival, which I'll speak about as well, in particular places in Ulster, predominantly in Belfast. But there's other pockets of Irish speakers around the island as well. But I'm originally from Donegal, but I've lived in 2 other counties in Ireland. So there are 3 specific dialects, and then maybe the version of Irish that you learn in school is nearly a more official dialect in and of itself. But my relationship with the language growing up was sort of marked, I think, by hesitancy, because I did not go to an Irish-speaking school or Gael school. I was educated through English for all of my primary and secondary education. But at the same time, Irish is compulsory. So I spent 13 years learning Irish, in quotation marks, every single day. But with the learning did not come fluency because it wasn't practiced. We didn't sit down and have conversations, and it always felt quite false in a way to be able to, at the end of my education, to be able to write about the history of the language and poetry, which, don't get me wrong, is a beautiful thing to be able to do. But when that isn't layered on top of a firm grounding and confidence in being able to speak and engage with communities through Irish every day, it feels like a very flaky foundation. So I had, following my education, when I finished college, I moved away. So I was living in Budapest, in Hungary, and in Brussels, in Belgium. And I definitely think the recognition of the beauty of a language is quite far-sighted. When you're close up with it, for me personally, I didn't appreciate the nuance and the history and the tradition that came with it, because it was in front of me every day. And yet I still didn't feel comfortable enough to properly engage with it. And then you realise that colonialism does a very good job on you, convincing you that what is native to you and what is precious is somehow backward and parochial, and that you should want to shake that off and, you know, come into the modern world. Yeah, it doesn't have value, it's denigrated. And it was when I was living in Belgium and I was surrounded by a beautiful mix of office mates who, when we were running campaigns, would be eagerly translating all the slogans and the key messages into maybe the 5 or 6 languages that they spoke.
Yes.
And the fear at the pit of my stomach when I was translating the Irish, and I would always be checking it 5 or 6 times to be sure that, is this actually right? I had this feeling of discomfort again, and this feeling of detachment. But when I moved back to Belfast, the beautiful thing about Belfast as a city, if any listeners have ever been, is that there is an immense pride and a deep appreciation among Irish speakers in the north of Ireland, so in Northern Ireland, because they don't have that present in their school every single day. You have to actively seek out opportunities to be able to practice Irish. There's still not a huge amount of Irish speaking or Irish medium schools in Northern Ireland, nowhere near enough for the interest, the level of demand that there is. We can talk about that for various reasons. But the beauty for me was being able to come back and to start to tap in again to this gift that I still had. And I signed up for an online, I suppose it was not really a language school. It wasn't formal. We didn't sit down and do hours and hours of grammar, but it's called Scoil Scarta, which literally translates as hedge school. And it refers back to a time in Ireland when children were not allowed to be educated through Irish if they were Catholic or if they were Presbyterian. So usually it happened in somebody's houses, but sometimes when children from a particular rural area didn't have another house to go to, they would go into the fields, the wood, the nearest open space that they had, maybe a hedge, and be educated through that. So it's a modern version of looking at how Irish has just made us more connected as a people to our heritage, to our culture, to nature. Irish is just such a beautiful language. Like even the word, and it's all of it is connected back to nature, to earth. Even the word for freckles, I was telling somebody over lunch another day, because I'm starting to get a few freckles on my nose from being in the Istanbul sun, and the word in English is just freckles. Doesn't tell you very much, but in Irish it's Pógan Grania, which means little kisses of the sun. Oh my God. So even just things like that, it's a much more musical language. And I think when people talk about Irish people, they talk about like our gift of the gab, our ability to talk, and the musicality that we have when we speak in English. It doesn't translate. But so I suppose it's a new relationship for me, but it is one that it was marked by a certain hesitancy and a fear of engaging almost. And I know that when we were speaking earlier, you had some hesitancy as well, maybe around identifying yourself in a particular way. I don't know if anything that I've said has resonated, or if you want to talk about that a little bit.
For sure. I mean, well, one, thank you for explaining just the context too. I think that you speaking to the built environment that led to, as you said, the demand around it or the willingness to seek it out. Living in New York City, as one of the most hyper diverse metropolitan areas on this planet. There's, I think, 7,000 of the world's 6,000 to 7,000 estimated language. You can find 10% of them in New York City. And you know, I as someone that speaks both English and Spanish, and I do not identify as indigenous, but of course I think many of us can claim both indigenous and colonizer lineages in our ancestry. I am, as an organizer, my orientation to indigeneity or to the reclamation of indigenous practices comes with, or I'm trying to cultivate a discipline around that practice, right? So as I'm hearing you process what it's like in the context of Northern Ireland, I'm also thinking about the context of New York City, where, I mean, just 90% of delivery workers are foreign born. And then if you look at the data around how many of those delivery workers speak indigenous languages first and then English or Spanish second, if they do, it's still quite high. And I think as a labor organizer, as a community organizer, and with my organization where we are organizing, the International Indigenous Hip Hop Festival, for example, there comes this question of, what is our power analysis? What is our practice and our discipline when creating spaces and visibility around indigenous languages or original languages, like in your context? You know, how do we have this conversation and dialogue that also goes beyond a nod? It goes towards the recognition that indigenous communities in New York City and around the globe are facing repression, that languages are disappearing every other week, that, the speakers of these communities tend to be in exploited industries, while they are at the same time keepers of this knowledge and this ancestral wisdom and language, like you said, that translate to things that are so much more beautiful than what we use on a daily basis. So it sparked something, of course, conversation over beer sparked all of this for me, and what it looks like for us to have that practice and that discipline in the work that we do. And, I think I've come away with a few things. One is really uplifting and visibilizing examples of institutions that are doing the work to bring some more equity into these spaces and into this dialogue. For example, the Mexican Studies Institute in CUNY in New York City, in collaboration with Endangered Language Association, has done a lot to advance accreditation and giving college credits to speakers of these original languages, Nahuatl, Mije, Garifuna, etc., so that they can get the same credits you would if you spoke Italian or French or German, right? And that, to me, is just one step forward in how we can kind of bring some more justice into this space that has been historically excluding, again, the keepers of these original languages. And the second is, really recognizing our roles as you and I are engaging with the language directly, or speakers of those languages in public interest law or in community organizing or in arts and culture, to just be really honest about our positionality, our orientation, our privileges around it, and to constantly be asking that question, how does what we do benefit or level the playing field a little bit more, or advance reparations in ways that, that move the conversation forward. So I've been reflecting on that. And yeah, I mean, there's it's kind of like trendy now, right? To say,
I was just going to say, you had, when we were speaking earlier, when you were saying like the pop cultureification of it, and it was something that I hadn't necessarily thought of before, but as soon as you said it, it was sort of a bit of a light bulb moment for me.
I don't know if that happens in your context too, in any way.
Not in the same way. I mean, in a positive way at the moment, there's a whole new wave of creators, be it musicians, artists, content creators who are engaging with the language in a completely new way. When a few years ago, you could have counted on one hand the number of creators who were producing content either bilingually in Irish and English or predominantly Oscailga through Irish. Now there is a whole wave, and there's for everybody to be able to access the language in whatever way they want. If it's somebody wants to learn a word of the day, if somebody wants to listen to podcasts, podcréile Oscailga, about just, everyday life and about scandals and latest gossip.
Right.
You have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
So I think maybe pop cultureification is happening on a more positive way on the island of Ireland. But I'm not sure if that's a similar experience for you.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, coming from the U.S., we're talking about thousands of languages, and it's hard. I can't simplify or be reductionist about how we discuss, the diversity of indigenous languages. But there is a growing trend, I think I would feel comfortable saying, in efforts to decolonize, right? To decolonize our practices, the way that we eat, the way that we speak. And I think that's really beautiful. And there is also a risk of, especially when we're talking about our hyper-capitalistic society, of those that have significant platforms and access and resources to shift the conversation, perhaps even with the best of intentions, doing so in a way that actually doesn't advance, again, the original speakers or keepers of these languages or of these practices. I'm guilty of it. I think a lot of us, if with some dialogue and accountability, would say the same. And I'm thinking in particular, for example, Willy Chavarria, who's an incredible Chicano designer. There's been a lot of controversy and conversation around a specific style of a sandal that comes from a community in Oaxaca that Adidas has then, in collaboration with Willy, created a new design and is now mass producing outside of Oaxaca. And the impact that has of this artisan design on the local designers who have kept that practice going for generations and are now seeing one of the world's largest multinational corporations run with it, and that doesn't necessarily come back to them, right? So again, I think as we started that conversation, I've just been thinking a lot about how does a return to those practices, to original languages, come with a practice of discipline and respect and a North Star of reparations and justice for the communities that, teach us this. And
And we were talking earlier, and it all comes back to, I think, as well, about empathy and coherence and how the messaging of a particular campaign actually aligns with reality. And I know that something that, and I have to give a shout out to Conor na Gaeilge, who are a fantastic all-island organisation, but in my work with Public Interest Litigation Support, I've been lucky enough to work alongside, and at the moment they have run fantastic campaigns. They have mobilised young people in Northern Ireland and other generations too, but particularly young people, to be incredibly proud of the language and to have this keenness to claim it and to fight for it. They're amazing campaigners, but where they have been failed and where communities have been failed in Northern Ireland is by an absence of political leadership, whether that is moral courage in terms of political leadership or literal absence of political leadership, in the fact that listeners might be familiar with the peace agreement, the Belfast Good Friday Agreement that was concluded in 1998, which is, don't get me wrong, an incredibly positive development, and any peace agreement should be valued and celebrated. But if we're being honest, the idealism of that has not been lived out in reality for people.
It's
and
still symbolic.
The power sharing government at Stormont has been absent for more time than it has been in existence. It has been down for more than 50% of its existence. So this is where communities have had to look at other strategies to put forward the change that they want to see in the world. And Conor na Gaeilge have been fantastic. We've worked alongside them And in the past 8 years, we have supported them. They are on their 3rd judicial review, so they are going to court. They just announced last month that with our support again, they're going back to court for the 3rd time in 8 years.
Wow.
And this is purely just to try and make our government and our elected representatives live up to the promises that they have made multiple times to introduce and to bring to life the promises in legislation to actually protect the Irish language.
There you go.
And that's the thing, yet again, fantastic examples of organising. And the gap is political courage. Oh, sigh. But on the hope, to bring it back to what we're talking about here in terms of hope-based communication, how they have mobilised and who they have brought into the conversation and how they have done that has been incredibly inclusive, incredibly positive. It isn't, the conversation is never about what anybody stands to lose from seeing the Irish language more prominently. It is all about how we all collectively can gain, whether we have cúpla focal, whether we have a few words of Irish, none at all, or whether we're a native speaker, and how they have framed. I encourage anybody to go and have a look at Renee Gallagher's work, because they truly are practitioners of hope-based communication.
That's great. Well, I feel like this is a good place to say
Slán go fóill.
There you go. Well, thank you, Emma, for the conversation.
Thank you so much, Garmila. How's that?
Okay.
We went over, huh?
No, we probably did.
This episode was made possible by contributions from the Action Lab and Social Change Initiative.